I'll say this. We're on to October. We are on to October, and we are going to talk about plenty of Detroit Tiger baseball stuff as they back into the postseason with their cheeks spread. It was a disastrous week in many ways, but here's the one thing I'll say about this Detroit Tiger team. The narratives are there. The storylines are there. I mean, this first series alone that they're going to be playing against Cleveland is a juicy one. You got to admit that. And we will discuss that before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's show. I want to start with a few show notes at Castellani2014 on Twitter. You can find me on TikTok as well. Just hit 10K, over 10K now. That's very meaningful to all of us. I appreciate that. Let's continue to get those numbers up. We are available on Apple Podcasts. We are available on iTunes in audio form. You can watch us on YouTube as well if you want to see this beautiful face. And of course, CastellaniContent.com is getting updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create. In fact, if you want to go back and rewatch every single post-game video from this season for the Tigers, you can. It's there, archived, CastellaniContent.com. All right, let's jump into it. I know I've been teasing Tigers, but let's start by talking about the Lions. Because weirdly, I think that I'm going to have a lot less to say about the Lions, and I think it says a lot about where this organization is at in many ways, that the Lions had a 24-point victory on Sunday, and we just kind of went ho-hum. I mean, I'll be really, I thought it was a pretty boring game. I thought it was a 4 out of 10 football game, especially, and maybe it's just expectations have been so elevated because that game against Baltimore was so amazing. And that, that was such a flashy game with a lot of big plays and a lot of, defensive stands. And this one was, I'm not even going to call it more efficient. It was just very workmanlike. And I do actually have to give the Cleveland Browns a little bit of credit to kind of start this thing off. That's a really good front seven they have. And I felt like Detroit's offense is very clearly not firing on all cylinders. And I think, well, as good as this Detroit team is, and they're very, very good, I think in a lot of ways, out about how you contain them, and it's just you prevent them from really getting the run game going. I thought Detroit was kind of aware that Cleveland was trying to do that early in the game. It felt like they came out firing, they came out passing. The JMO Goff connection was off for a heavy majority of the game. It just never really felt like they got right, and yet I never had any doubts the Lions weren't going to win that game, largely because on the other side, the Browns are just putrid, and the Lions took advantage of it. They forced turnovers. They had nobody that could take on Aiden Hutchinson, who just had a monster game. Should have had a bigger game. In fact, had a few big plays called back, but God, it felt like he was in the backfield on every single play. You force really 3 turnovers that led to 17 points on shortened fields. Besides that, this would have been a much closer game. And despite it being a 3-possession ball game, I felt like this game was actually a little bit closer than the final numbers indicated, despite the fact that I never really felt like it was in doubt. And it's weird because I want to spend a lot of time in these games, but I don't really think there's a lot to go off of here. I think that we're so familiar with this Lions core at this point that, again, I mean this as a compliment, nothing really surprises us that much. They've played a lot of memorable games over the last few years, a lot of big moments, a lot of late game field goals, touchdowns, what have you. This didn't really have any of that. It was a concise, easy 24-point victory. And not much else to write home about. And now this team goes on the road to face the Bengals, who are going to be without Burrow, obviously, for a long time, though Jake Browning considered to be one of the better backups in the league. Who knows? Maybe the Browns will have made a trade by the time these teams play each other after the way Jackson Dart performed yesterday. I don't really think that the Giants have much of a reason to retain Russell Wilson at this point. Really looking down the road. But here's the one thing that I will say about this Lions team real quick that I think is a very key quality to point out. 2 things. 1, no team in the NFL over the last 4 seasons has responded better after a loss than the Detroit Lions have. And obviously you lose that week 1 game to Green Bay. It gets kind of ugly. You go out and you win your next 3, including going to Baltimore and winning what was a very impressive game on Monday night. That's very impressive. Secondly, this team very rarely gets upset. And if they get upset, it's not a shocker. Like, okay, yes, they lost to Washington in the playoffs last year. That's an upset. But it's playoffs. Every team you're playing in the playoffs is going to be pretty good. They don't have a game like what the Packers had against the Browns last weekend where you have a lead late, you get into this rock fight, and you end up losing. They do a great job of checking off so many different boxes. And even on a day where I felt like they played, 5 out of 10 football, they were still efficient enough and effective enough to win that game by 3 scores. positives all around. There's things to clean up. I do think, surprisingly, this team has looked a little bit undisciplined over the last few games, whether it's false start penalties offensively, holding penalties defensively. They've kind of ruined a few drives, and that's especially noticeable when you're going up against a front seven as good as Cleveland's. You can't play behind the sticks, but I'm literally grasping at straws to complain about things that happened in a 24-point victory. I really wish I had much more to dissect here, but this is just where this team is at right now. Man, they're in a very good place. I think that there was a lot of legitimate concerns after that week 1 loss, and so many of those are in the rear view now, whether it's with the offensive line, with the run game, but especially with the coordinators. As long as Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are here, you have a lot of faith that they're not only going to win a lot of games, but they're going to hire the right people. It does not feel like, we got a lot of season left, but it does not feel like they have taken the step back that a lot of us may have expected them to take, given the fact that they lost both coordinators in the offseason. Now they got an opportunity to keep this train rolling. All right, yeah, I forgot to bring this up, but we had no college football this week. We had no Michigan, no Michigan State. They got games coming up this weekend. I think that they will both be winnable games. Michigan State playing a putrid UCLA team, and Michigan playing at home against a not much better Wisconsin team, quite frankly. And I don't really feel the need to preview these right now because we got a lot to discuss in regard to the baseball world. The Detroit Tigers, our bread and butter here, and our bread was very unbuttered, depending on how you look at this, over the last week or so. Okay, a lot to discuss here. I don't even really know where to start. Another disastrous week of Tiger baseball in so many ways. The Tigers will not win the American League Central. They will have to wait at least another year. It will be at least 12 years before they can say that they have reclaimed the American League Central Division crown. And I guess I will start with that before I get into the positives and some of the controversial things that happened this week. Okay. For the Tigers not to win the American League Central in 2025, when they had a 15.5 game lead, including a 14 game lead over the Cleveland Guardians, is horrifying. It's horrifying. It is mathematically the greatest divisional collapse in the history of this sport. And I'm just absolutely baffled as to what exactly went wrong, because as I talked about it with Cody Stavenhagen on Chris and Company on Wednesday this week, or I think Thursday, it was a little bit of everything. And it just continued and it continued and it continued. And every time you felt like there was an opportunity for them to get right, they would take another step back. It was the textbook definition of a clear collapse. And this organization is going to have to wear that. I mean, I'd argue they're going to have to wear it forever, depending on what happens in October. And that is the point I wanted to make, because there's a time release on this. If the Tigers go on a run here in October, we're not going to remember this team for the collapse. Look back to 2006. Nobody thinks about the fact that they coughed up that division. They played in the fucking World Series. I remember, beating the Yankees, Maglio's home run, right? But if they lay another egg in October and the team we saw in the second half shows up in the postseason, boy, oh boy, this is going to be a long off season. It's going to be a long off season filled with me raising a lot of questions and being very critical of a lot of people that I like. That is true. And I'm not burying them yet, because it would be hypocritical as somebody who has said time and time again, I really believe everything resets in October. I really think everything changes. I don't take much out of how a team performed in the regular season and say, oh, this is how it's going to be in October. Weird things can happen, and weird things could happen with this team. In a lot of ways, they've been so bad for months that there's a part of me that's like, water has to re-find its level again. Because I think this team is somewhere between what they were in the first half, which was the best team in baseball, and what they were in the second half, which was trash. I think there's got to be some evening out. Like, I know Riley Green is better than how he's performed. I know Kerry Carpenter is better than how he's performed. Or Parker, some of these pitchers, they just didn't perform. They didn't execute in the second half of the season. Maybe you get into October and they find it again. I genuinely don't know. But the controversy that came about this week was at the very end. Tigers are in the postseason. They will be playing Cleveland again. I'm going to talk about that matchup here in a minute. The controversy came on Sunday. Really, it started when AJ decided that they weren't going to pitch Tarek Skubal. Now, I don't think there's any Tiger fan that was angry at that decision. You had an opportunity, millions of opportunities already to clinch the division, couldn't get it done. You'd much rather have Tarek for game one of a playoff series. I understand that. I think everybody understands that. That would have been reckless and stupid to just for the sake of history say we want to win the division here. At the same time, the not give a fuck meter for the Tigers was at an all-time high on Sunday, and they lost a one-run game to the to the Red Sox, where they could have found a way to win the American League Central and reclaim it at the last second. They did not care, and I don't care what AJ said after the game. The lineup they threw out there, and the fact that they used no pinch hitters at any point, the fact that they stretched Chris Paddock to go third time through the order, throw 100 pitches. Their goal was to rest as many guys as possible. This was not important to them that they reclaim the division. I'm split on how I feel about that. And as I alluded to a second ago, there's a time release, because it is another example of this organization kind of having smartest guy in the room syndrome. It's them saying, you know what? It's all good. We don't need to reclaim the division, even though we had a 15.5 game lead. It's all good. You know what? It is all good. We don't need to go out and get anybody at the deadline. Okay, if it's all good and you don't need X or Y, at some point you're going to need Z, okay? Eventually, it's like a guy who does nothing but take pitches, then complains when he takes strike three. Like, you got to swing the bat at some point. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you make moves at the deadline, and it doesn't matter if you go for the division at the end. Okay, what does matter? Winning in the postseason. And that's where the time release comes in. Because they go on a run, we're not going to be having this discussion. We're not going to be having this discussion. I felt like there could have been a middle ground. I felt like you could have pinch hit somebody there in the later innings just to create the facade that you kind of cared. Because, and maybe they don't give a shit about this, but fan sentiment does matter. And the approval rating of this current regime has gone significantly down over the last few weeks. Maybe not as much with AJ, but definitely with Scott Harris. And especially when you have a manager who is playing the matchups more consistently than any other manager in baseball, just throwing Jake Rogers to the Wolves, just throwing Trey Sweeney to the Wolves and saying game 162 doesn't matter. I understand the frustration. I really do. And again, if they go to Cleveland and cough this thing up and they make a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes, like the mistakes that they made in the games they played against Cleveland last week at Progressive Field, AJ's not indecisiveness, he was very decisive about it, but AJ's kind of blasé attitude towards the final game of the season, I think, will be questioned. There's this contingency of people who believe that I will never criticize AJ Hinch for anything. My genuine thought is that I still think he's one of the best managers in baseball. I do think he's guilty of overmanaging sometimes, but I also believe that I'd rather have a guy who overmanages as opposed to undermanaged. And I think when people talk about who they'd rather have, okay, let's say if you were to fire AJ Hinch would get hired by another team tomorrow. And I have a hard time believing there's somebody you could bring in that I would feel better about than him. It's just the truth. I think that at the end of the day, a heavy majority of what's happened here in the second half falls on the players. And that's kind of what leads me to this playoff preview here against Cleveland. The dreaded Cleveland Guardians, the boogeyman, so to speak, a team that was a thorn in your side for a decade when you were bad and has now been the bane of your existence for a few years ever since you've been good. They are the reason why you haven't won the Central over the last 2 years. They are the reason why you didn't make it past the ALDS last year. And now you got to go into their place and try to win a best 2 out of 3 game series. Here's the truth. And I know that I speak in these kind of, very hyperbolic statements about, oh my God, we can't beat this team. No, the genuine truth, and one of the reasons why I get so freaking mad about this matchup all the time, Detroit absolutely has the players and the personnel to beat the Cleveland Guardians. Okay, this is not a David or Goliath situation. And this is not me taking anything away from the historic comeback that Cleveland had this season, okay? Or the way that they run things there in Cleveland, or the job that Stephen Vogt does. I acknowledge all of it, okay? They earned the right to call themselves AL Central champions once again. Okay? I'm not knocking it. Definitely not. But when the Tigers play Cleveland, there's this vibe that we're playing the 98 Yankees. That isn't true. The numbers speak for themselves. Cleveland as a team had a .225 batting average this season. I believe, I could be wrong, I may have seen this number somewhere and I might have been misled. I think that's the lowest batting average ever for a team that won their division. They finished the year with a negative run differential and won their division. There are a copious number of statistics that indicate that Detroit should have an advantage in this series. But it's where the mental side of this comes in. And I don't know if it's a conscious thing. I don't think Tarek Skubal gets out of bed in the morning and goes, oh, God, I got to face Cleveland today. I just think that Cleveland has an identity as a ball club that doesn't play into Detroit's hands at all. Detroit's a pitching staff that likes to throw strikes. Cleveland makes contact. Cleveland loves to put the ball in play. Detroit is not a great fundamental team. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're going to make a lot of errors. Against guys like Tarek Skubal, who strike out a lot of guys. Well, Cleveland works pitch counts. Even if they end up being outs, they kind of have a tendency to grind out at bats. Detroit is a swing and miss heavy offense. Cleveland strikes out guys. Okay. At the end of the day, Detroit can't really hit their pitching. And there's a million things I could point to and say, this has to be better. This has to be better. This has to be better. Look, if Tarek and Jack Flaherty pitch 7 scoreless each, Tiger's going to win the series, right? That's easy to point to. That's easy to look at and be like, well, that's the determining factor. In my opinion, what will decide not only how well Detroit does against Cleveland in the wild card series, what will decide how Detroit performs this entire postseason is what really ended up derailing them in the latter stretch, and that is how the middle of their lineup will perform. Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, and Spencer Torkelson, while Tork especially at various points may have had a big hit or two, all of them in big situations, it became a meme this weekend, endless number of times. But these guys in big situations did not perform ever in high leverage moments. And when I'm watching a Cleveland Guardians game and I see they got 2 on and J Rams at the dish, I'm just thinking, here we go. If I'm watching a Yankee game and it's 2 on for Aaron Judge, I'm thinking here comes a run or two, maybe even a home run, right? I mean, I could probably in the last few months count to 20, 30 times in which it's been first and second no out, second and third 1 out, second and third no outs, Glaber due up, Riley due up, Carey due up, Torque due up, and it's a pop out or a strikeout or a ground out or something non-productive. That absolutely cannot happen in the postseason. Okay. Now that isn't me saying they got to bat 1,000. Okay. Hitting is very hard, but it's the little things. And that's a big Cleveland does all the little things right that Detroit doesn't do particularly well. I'll give you a prime example. On the game Detroit played against Cleveland, the first game of the series at Progressive Field, when Tarek Skubal kind of blew up there in the 6th inning, he had a balk where a runner went from second to third with, I believe, 1 out in the inning. Next pitch was a ground ball to second base for an RBI ground out. Put the ball in play. It ain't sexy. It ain't that impressive, but it scored a run. Okay. I'm not asking you to rip doubles and hit home runs every time there's a runner in scoring position, but you need to be making fucking contact, putting the ball in play, hitting sac flies and lifting the ball. Those are the at-bats that we circle. Okay. The truth is the difference between a 100-win team, which there aren't any in baseball this year, but a 95-win team and an 85-win team, it ain't that much. Okay. There's a pretty razor-thin margin, and often the difference between a team that's playing in the World Series versus a team that doesn't even make it to October are those little moments. Its ability to execute pitches with 2 strikes, its ability to put together good at-bats with 2 outs and guys in scoring position, and that just killed you. It absolutely killed you. That's what lost them to the division, in my opinion. People can point to Harris and point to Hinch or point to the pitching staff. You know what? The pitching staff was pretty fucking good down the stretch. Even this bullpen, which we have maligned, right? Vest pitched 2 really good innings this week. Canley's looked all right. Montero's looked okay. They're not amazing. Holton was great down the stretch. Mize had a few good outings. We know how good Tarek is. They weren't scoring runs. And when they weren't scoring runs, they weren't fucking putting teams away. I'm telling you, man, this is a huge postseason for Riley Green, because I think the way that the entire fan base feels about this guy is going to be dependent on how he performs this postseason. Because right now, he is very much in the crosshairs of a lot of people in this fan base, and I understand why. He does not collect clutch hits, and he doesn't have a great feel for the strike zone, and he strikes out way too much. Now, because this is how baseball works, we have seen multiple times this season Riley be red hot. Haven't seen it since July, but because this baseball world is so topsy-turvy, if he gets hot again, he's toast of the town all of a sudden, okay? And I would argue that's a bit silly, but that's how October works. Think of all the average players, and Riley's not an average player, but think of all the average players who became legends because they had a hot October. David Eckstein, David Freese, he had an all right career, but Pablo Sandoval, right? I mean, take your pick. Happens. Marco Scutero. This stuff happened. Delman fucking Young. Delman Young was a negative WAR player, and the guy was money in October, right? So I really don't care at this point how things have gone in the 162. And I'd say that with 87 wins, I'd say that if they had 107 wins. How we feel about this team and how we feel about this organization is going to be entirely determined based on how they perform in the coming weeks, assuming, of course, they play over the next several weeks. I mean, they could be out after 2 games. If this thing ends with a sweep against Cleveland and they don't win a game and they're not particularly competitive, this will be an extremely long, frustrating offseason in which this will be the franchise that choked. They will be remembered for their collapse. They'll be remembered for the failures. And it will be a giant scarlet letter that they're going to have to wear well into next season, right? If they make a run, if they beat Cleveland, if they start to win a few games, right? Scott Harris is the wonder kid again. AJ Hinch turned this thing around. No, you don't trade Scooble. You got to bring him back because you could win a World Series with this roster, right? I'm telling you, that's how quickly things change. That's why I'm out of the prediction game, quite frankly. I know they have the players to do it, okay? This is not some great roster. It's not that much worse than Cleveland's. I would argue it's even better than Cleveland's, right? But the only way to prove that is you got to beat them. You have to beat them, and you're going to have to beat them in their place. As much as it's going to take years off my life, it probably had to be this way. It's not to this level, but it's kind of like the Red Sox in 2004. They had to go through the Yankees. That wasn't going to end with them doing anything other than, ending the curse of the Bambino and starting their incredible run that they had, right? Detroit's got to go through Cleveland at some point. And while, there was the possibility of them maybe going to New York for the wild card, I wanted Cleveland. I want to exercise these demons. And I don't even know if it's going to end a narrative, but holy shit, it would feel good. Oh my God, it would feel so good to be able to go there and knock them off. You got Tarek on extended rest in game 1. Players are there, chances there. Everything else you got to push to the side right now and just give it the old college try and hope that you can right some wrongs, because it's been an abysmal second half, but that means nothing now. It's time for October. All right, this is going to be a shorter episode, but like I said, no college football this week, so that clips off like 10, 15 minutes of the show, and honestly, I'd rather have a nice, concise, short show than anything that's bloated and long, so that will do it for today's episode. You can follow me on Twitter, @Castellani2014. You can find us on TikTok. Over 10,000 followers on there now, which I greatly appreciate. We're on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're available in audio form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and of course CastellaniContent.com is being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create, and we've put out a lot of good stuff, man, over the last few weeks. Last week was pretty crazy with the Cleveland stuff, and I'm sure it will be again this week. I'm really excited. Nervous. I want my team to be good, but I'm proud of the content we put out, even all the blow-ups and everything. You guys really keep me going, and you keep Austin and I going and believing in what we're doing, and just praying to God that something good can happen and something can pop off. So here's to October. I will talk to you guys again here real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.